Welcome everyone to another episode of Coral Living. Today we got a special guest with us. He's from over the pond. His name is Jan and he is the Slovak Muslim. Today we're going to hear a little bit about the Muslim perspective, maybe some of their beliefs and stuff, unpack some stuff. But Jan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
I thought maybe a good way to kind of like get into this would be just for you to let our viewers know a little bit about what your channel is all about, because you have your own YouTube channel, right? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the Slovak Muslim YouTube channel is all about.
Sure. I mean, it was called Debating Truth because I wasn't a Muslim like 2 years ago. So I started YouTube just kind of researching different things, talking about philosophy and stuff like that. And after some time, 1 year and a half, I became a Muslim. It's in Islam, you take a shahada, which is like your baptism or whatever in Christianity, similar stuff, but it's much simpler. And I actually became a Muslim. So since then, I actually changed my channel and I mostly talk about Islam or the perspective of Muslims. So I should stress that I'm not born Muslim. I'm from a country with no Muslims. In my family, there are no Muslims. I've only been to 2 Muslim countries. So my perspective is different. I'm a white European guy who became a Muslim. And for 30 years, I lived as a non-Muslim. So I did everything like everyone else. So my perspective is slightly different. I'm not an expert on Islam. So some questions maybe I won't be able to answer. I have some perspective, obviously, but I'm not like a scholar, let's say. I'm just a guy on YouTube.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. So, being a minority in a country where there aren't a lot of Muslims, how is it that you landed on Islam as your religion of preference, or maybe you saw some type of a truth within there that stuck out, beyond everything else? Especially since you said you come, Slovakia is a Christian or Catholic,
Yeah,
or
very Catholic.
yeah. So how did that happen?
It's a pretty big topic, but it has nothing to do with my country because I actually became a Muslim by watching YouTube videos from the US mostly, or the UK. So it wasn't really anything in my language. I didn't even know we had like some Muslims here or any mosque or nothing like. I was just mainly consuming online content from YouTube and getting into debates or watching a lot of arguments, philosophy arguments. So I was an atheist. Like you could call me agnostic atheist, but I was more like an atheist. So I would not believe in God. That was my position, and I wasn't even curious to find out anything else. Like I was just ignorant. I didn't want to learn anything. I just thought I'm the best as an atheist. Like I was just like, there's no God. I don't even want to talk about this. But slowly over the years, I spent I guess, a year looking into this because it starts with not like I need a religion. That's not how it starts. It starts with, let's say you have some experience, whatever. It can be like a death experience. Somebody dies, or you go through like a trauma, or whatever, depression, anything like that. So you have some moment in your life, and then you start reflecting, like, okay, is what I'm believing right now, is this true, or is this like just something I adopted from society because everyone's an atheist? But what am I doing here? So then I start kind of like going through like, well, what is the point of life? And then you start asking these deeper questions, and quickly you figure out that yeah, there are some answers in philosophy, but a lot of them contradict each other. So you have different fields in philosophy, and each of them are kind of like, let's say you have a communist field, then you have libertarians, liberalism, you have people who don't believe. I actually don't know how specifically this group of people is called, but they don't believe life should even exist. So you have like so many ideas in the world since the beginning, and they all are kind of in odds with each other. So I'm like, well, what is this? There's no truth here. There's some bits and pieces, but then you start looking at religion. I mean, obviously, you have to get to that point where you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to look into different things like Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, because I was raised Catholic, but I just kind of like forgot about it because, when you go through puberty, you kind of I don't know. I just didn't like going to church. I never believed this. I just kind of did it because my family forced me to do it. So that's many people do it like this here in Europe. So I guess it's the same in the US and Canada if you're brought up in a Christian, let's say, country. But yeah, it was just kind of like reflecting. I don't know if I should get deeper into that process or if you want me just kind of like.
Well, it's fine. I understand what you're saying about like experiences. That is kind of like a personal realm, and we can get into that a little bit later if you want. But I thought a good place to begin would be kind of just with beliefs in Islam. Now, you said you're kind of fairly new to Islam, right?
Yeah, I would say I'm fairly new. So I might have some knowledge gaps, but I think it's not like I'm a completely new Muslim by this point. I'm not like someone who just researched Islam. I've been studying for a while, so I can give pretty good overview, I think. So yeah, but so do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, I do. Why is, because this is how I understand it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but why is Muhammad the final prophet? Like, how come there's no more, how come he's the final prophet of God and that there's no more prophets after him, or not able to be any more prophets after him?
I mean, this is a pretty deep question. There's been a lot of research done on this, so I don't think I'm qualified to answer it. To be honest, the question itself, why, you can ask many things like this. So for example, you can ask, why is there a red light on the traffic light? Like, why is it red? Why is it not blue? I don't know. Like some things, for example, in Islam, you have to pray 5 times a day, but why not 6? Well, because it's a commandment from God. So like some things, it's kind of hard to explain because they don't actually have like a reason to be, And with the Prophet Muhammad, it's because, the Quran itself is the final revelation and it's supposed to be preserved. This means that it was memorized from the time of the Prophet. So he taught the companions the Quran, so they memorized every word. Then it was written in the time of Uthman, which was the 3rd caliph. And then it was kind of like memorized still. So people in the mosque that I go to, they still have the same memorized Quran than the time of the Prophet. So the point of the Quran is this. In the Quran it says, God says that he will preserve this religion and Muhammad is the last prophet. There will be no more messengers.
Right.
Why? I don't know. Like, I don't know. You have to ask him. But why is Muhammad the last one? I have no idea.
Well, I think part of the reason I am thinking about that, or maybe it ties into the next part that I wanted to say, was that I actually watched your interview with that Karim Abuzad. I don't know if I'm saying it right. And that was an interesting interview and conversation. He's Muslim too, right?
I bet, yeah, but he's like a sheikh in San Diego. He's like teaching Islam for 30 years, so I mean, you can't even compare us. I was just
No,
new to Islam and asking him
I'm not trying to do that. I just noticed that he said something that I actually thought was pretty good, and he was kind of comparing different religious doctrines or different religious beliefs, and he was actually saying that Allah shouldn't be. It's wrong to categorize him in the same way or describe him in the same way as maybe somebody of the Christian faith would, which would say, in the beginning God created the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. And Karim was saying that, you shouldn't attribute such human weaknesses to God, like as if God would need to rest or something, right? Or as if God would be, or Allah, would be like jealous or something, or regret his decision to make humanity, and almost saying like, why would Allah be that way? Why would Allah be restricted by the same sort of things that humans are restricted by? And that kind of just got me into thinking about that would lead me to ask a question like, well, then why just one prophet? Is there flexibility in the Quran? Is there flexibility in the scriptures at all to be like, Well, maybe that was true for then, but now there can be new prophets, or maybe there can be things added. I know in the Christian faith, that's what we grew up in.
Yeah.
It was really driven home a lot of the time, like, don't add to this. Nothing should be added or taken away from this. But it's like, I noticed just in a couple of parts of the Bible that God did seem to have a character that could be like convinced of things. Like Abraham, I think it was Abraham that was like a friend of God, and maybe it was Lot that was trying to barter with God for the souls of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, hey, if I can find this many, will you spare them? And God would say, well, fine, if you can find this many, I'll spare them. But like, he never ended up finding enough people to. God ended up destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. I think the point of what I'm trying to get at here is that.
I think I know what you're asking.
Yeah. It's essentially just like, how does it compare in that way to Christianity, and is there room for flexibility? Is there is there something that you disagree with? Can you disagree with something, and can you have an alternate opinion, or is it pretty rigid in the beliefs, in your opinion?
Yeah, there's a few questions in there, but I would just kind of highlight a few. So first thing, Allah just means God in Arabic, so you can just call God Allah or God, doesn't really matter. Even Jews, they call God Allah in the Hebrew language, in their scripture. So it's not like a new thing. It's basically just an Arabic word for God. The second thing is the whole thing where you attribute to God, but we have to look at this word God, because many people have like this vision of an old man on the sky with like a beard, or something like a Father and Son and Holy Spirit. Like all this is like gone, okay?
A gender.
So, gender, anything that you can imagine that can be attributed to humans, he doesn't have. Even though I'm saying he, but that's wrong, right? So Allah, actually in Arabic, it means the only object that's one, because there cannot be more Allahs. There can be more gods. That's why we prefer to say Allah, because you cannot have plural. And this concept is key in Islam. It's called Tawheed, which means the oneness of God. That's why Muslims do this all the time, or they say like, for example, the Shahada, which is when you become a Muslim, you say La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but God. By saying there is no God, you are denying anything in existence, atheism, all philosophy, anything. You're denying everything and just saying there's just God. There's nothing else, because he is the creator of everything. So anything that is created cannot be God. So for example, if you have a God of war, well, obviously that's a human concept, because you mix the war with God, or you have some animal that's worshipped in some parts of the world, like a cow or something. Obviously, something's wrong. Like, what is this? This is a creation. Like, why would I bow down to some cow? Or you have people, like in Christianity, you have statues of saints, and you ask them, like, hey, Saint Mary, please protect me, or Saint this guy and that guy. Like, that's like, why would you do this? This saint or whoever is this person has no real power. The only real power exists with God. So the same then goes with the Jesus, because Jesus was born. He didn't exist before. So he is the creation of God. And we in Islam, obviously, there's a big conflict, not conflict, but there's a different understanding of Jesus. He is one of the biggest messengers. He's in the Quran mentioned more times than Muhammad. And there's even his virgin birth. Everything is described. We have a lot of similarity. We have also the 6-day story, but it's 6, let's say, time episodes. It's not 6 days, right? And there's no resting on the 7th day. All this is kind of taken out. So you have to look at it contextually with Judaism and Christianity. Islam is like the last update. So like first you had Judaism, but what happened is the rabbis, basically, what you can do in Judaism, you can argue with God. So sometimes you win arguments. And again, intuitively, this doesn't seem right. Like, how can you win an argument with God? What? And so basically, then we had Jesus, who came to renew the faith of people, not to be so depending on the rabbis, but to really reflect on their creation. But then what we say in Islam is that people took Jesus as God, and there's many verses and things like where he never says he's actually God in the Bible, right? But people kind of created this whole Trinity concept I think it was the 2nd or 3rd century after his death, because the early Christians never had this idea of Jesus being God. This is not what they believed. There was no Trinity. So you can actually study, like I researched this right before I became a Muslim to make sure I'm not doing something crazy, but
barking up the wrong religion.
Yeah, so like the whole thing, like Christmas, that's made up, Easter made up. It's a pagan holiday, right? Jesus wasn't born on the 25th. This is like history. Like you can just Google this, and it's not conspiracy. There have been books written. The Gospels of John or Mark, they are written by anonymous authors. So all the quotes you have from Jesus where he says something virtuous, you actually don't know if he actually said this. Like, how do I know? Where's the verification? Where's the proof for this? It doesn't exist. You have to kind of believe in this. And plus the original sin idea and the doctrine of crucifixion, all that in Islam we believe is kind of packaged because the Trinity concept of religion is a very pagan kind of way, because there's been Trinitarian religions all over the world. Yeah. So what happened is Constantine and other emperors, they took these pagan religions and they thought, like, how can we mix it up with Christianity and make a Roman religion out of this? So then you had like people who celebrate, let's say, when winter solstice happened, like when it's dark outside in the winter on 25th December, right? So the pagans would then celebrate it by taking these trees, the evergreen tree, and putting lights on it. Yeah. Right? Christians took that and said, like, no problem, we'll do this, and we'll say Jesus was born.
We were joking about this at Christmas. There's actually like a verse in the Bible that says to like not cut down a tree and adorn it and put it in your home. In the Bible.
It might be true, yeah. And so imagine even the Church of England, which was the official church of the British Empire, they actually forbid people from celebrating Christmas until the 17th century because they viewed it as a pagan holiday that has nothing to do with Christianity. Of course, then it was overthrown because in Christianity you had this big conflict. You had the conflict between science and what the Bible says. And so in the Middle Ages there was a Reformation. You had Protestants kind of separating Catholics, wars between each other. Actually, like Muslims, a lot of times they actually helped the Protestants, like by fighting the Catholics, but that's mostly Ottoman Empire. But that's irrelevant. And basically you had this Reformation, and then came these philosophers, so like John Locke, Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, these British philosophers who said, well, we have to create a system of morality that is not based on the Bible, because it's obviously flawed, and we have these problems here with the church. It's taking like money from people, people can buy things, like all this, it's corrupted. So let's just separate church from the state. Let's have a secular power and the religion, and that the power really will be the secular. Like this is really what's going to be the ruling the country, and people can be religious if they want to. But we're going to have a laws based on like reason and science. And how do we then understand what's right and wrong? Well, we're going to use this principle of harm. So whatever doesn't hurt you, that's good. Whatever hurts you, that's bad. And that's how we're going to organize our society. So that's liberalism, classical liberalism, basically in a nutshell, where you kind of say, well, anything that creates pleasure is good. Anything that decreases pleasure is bad. Utilitarian principle. Yeah. And so that's kind of the mindset of early liberals, and that's kind of what we have today. It's still going on in all the areas of our society, because people still think like just this is kind of extreme example, not extreme, but for some people. Some people don't agree with gay marriage, right? Let's take that as an example. But on liberalism, there's nothing wrong with it, because there's no harm. So what's the harm? Many people say, what's the harm in this? Two people love each other, they want to do it. Why do you care? So on that mindset, there's no problem. So you see, today, most societies still think in that, and it's actually a new idea, this liberal idea. This wasn't the case a few hundred years ago that people would think like that. They would have their morality from God. They wouldn't take it from like this principle of liberalism or scientific or secular principle. And so you have this conflict then. So in Islam, this doesn't exist. Islam doesn't have a separation between church and state. Islam actually is not even a religion only. It's a system of life in economy. For example, you have a specific way how to deal with contracts, with interest. You cannot take loans. In Islam, it's forbidden. So I can't have a mortgage, for example, or you can't do usury, so you can't like set up an interest rate that's kind of crazy. Like there's a lot of restrictions on economy because it then creates these fake bubbles like you had in the States in 2008, where you had like economy based on nothing and interest rates, and people take mortgages and then it collapses. This never happens in Islam because everything in Islam is based on real assets. So if you want to have a mortgage, they'll give you a loan, but the bank will actually buy the house for you. So they won't give you just money for the house, they'll buy it and they will share the risk with you. You see, so it's different. You're kind of like renting from the bank for 30 years and buying back your ownership. So it's a different system because everything is backed by real assets. So you can never go broke as an economy. Now, is it applicable in all countries? No, because this economy is limited, and of course we want to make as much money as possible. So, insurance companies it's in the West we don't do this obviously, but some Islamic countries still hold this belief because it's based on the Prophet's teaching and Islam and the Quran. This is specifically written in the Quran.
I know probably because we're over here in the West, and I know there are probably some Christians who are watching this, and I know they're probably like they'll be shaking the screen. They'll be shaking the screen about the Jesus comment about not being God and all that stuff. I don't have skin in that game. But what I would say is I do, like the first thing that comes to mind, because I did grow up with it, I know scriptures that would say, like, the Pharisees came to Jesus and said, under what authority do you have? And Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am, the title that God uses. And in the beginning of John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and it became flesh and dwelt among men. Like, there are scriptures that I'm sure Christians would be like, and I don't want to get too much into that. I just wanted to, like, for them, I just wanted to say, I hear you. But what I do want to take a look at is kind of the Quran. I know you've been a believer now for a few years in Islam. Have you had a chance to get
year and a half? Yeah.
Have you had a chance to get through all of the Quran?
Yeah, I've read it a couple of times. Now this is. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Quran, I'm not sure what kind of question you might have, so feel free to shoot.
Well,
hopefully I'll be able.
More of kind of like a perspective, because I've read bits and pieces of it, but then knowing that you were going to be a guest, I listened to the audio version and got through it. So I read through, I listened to the whole Quran, and my impressions from the Quran, there was a giant emphasis on believing in the book and the eternal state of those who believed and follow and those who did not follow. Like hundreds of verses. Like if you listen on audio, which I recommend doing sometime, just listen to the full audio. There was such a heavy emphasis on believe in this word, and you will be in fields of flowing streams, and there will be a horrible fire for those who don't believe. And coming from a kind of an outside perspective, looking at that, going through that, I can't help but somewhat feel like that would be like a fear tactic, maybe, to like manipulate you into being so afraid that if you don't follow what's in this book, that you might spend an eternity somewhere on fire.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you, when you're confronted with that? What do you think?
I don't actually see it as any problem because I've studied this for a while. So essentially, before even kind of like looking into these chapters about hell or heaven or anything like that, I look at it like, well, how do I know, let's say that, how do I trust that the Prophet Muhammad didn't make this up, he didn't lie, he wasn't doing all this stuff. So once I cleared that up and I studied his life, or like realized how he was persecuted, how actually they killed a lot of people in his family, and like spent his entire life teaching this thing, which Actually, he died in debt with no money and nothing. So like kind of like really difficult life he had, and all the people they followed him had pretty difficult lives. And
All those
then
prophets. A
yeah,
lot
I
of
mean
the prophets had rough
that's
lives.
all of them usually.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of bringing in something new, you know. I think the worst was Noah, where I think in the Quran it says he spent 900 years giving people like telling them like, hey, there's God and there's going to be day of judgment, and nobody believed him.
Don't think it's going to be easy. There's plenty of scripture and all kinds of variety of religions that point out that if you're especially if you're a close follower of God or some kind of exemplary follower, you're probably going to have a life of struggles, right?
Yeah. And so
that
basically,
goes without saying. I don't even know why I said that.
So the idea is to like really ask yourself, well, Islam is trying to teach you something. How do you develop a good character? Because maybe you can have a good character as a non-Muslim. So you give in charity, you do good things. But essentially, in Islam, the point is to do everything for Allah, not for yourself, or not even do it for recognition or anything like that. If you don't have Allah, it's kind of hard to do this because, you can be charitable, but at some point you're going to be like, why am I doing this? Or at some point you're not going to pray as much as you would before because there's no incentive for you. And so Islam incentivizes you to be good by doing good deeds, which essentially is the point of Islam, so that when you die, you have enough good deeds so that in the day of judgment, let's say, there's this image of you're gonna be weighed, your deeds are gonna be weighed in and compared how many good versus bad deeds you had.
Can you measure that in this life?
No, that's like day of judgment.
But what do you do, like as a Muslim? Like, do you not worry that might not have enough good deeds under the belt when you get there?
Yeah, I mean that's always Muslims' fear. So that's why Muslims are never kind of chilled out as Christians, where Christians mostly like they drink alcohol, they do many things which are kind of contradicting Jesus' teaching. Like if I told a normal Christian, like, why don't you live like Jesus? Like I don't have to do anything. He died for my sins. Like chill out, bro. Like I'm good. I'm going to heaven. This doesn't happen in Islam,
Yeah, I was curious about that with Islam, and maybe you can. I'm going to say a few things, and then maybe you can like give your thoughts on it. Because I was wondering.
Well, maybe if I can just kind of finish what I was saying. The good deeds, the bad deeds, and basically, essentially there are different use cases. So, for example, people who are born before Islam, they're going to be judged differently. So you should be. There has been. In Islam, it says there's been over 100,000 prophets sent to mankind in each nation. So if you had a messenger and you followed him, you're going to be fine. If you didn't, it's going to be a problem. So if you follow Jesus, that's fine. If you follow Moses, if you follow Abraham, whatever. So this is kind of how it is. There's been always an ethnic focus on a group. So let's say even Jesus wasn't sent to all mankind, but only to the lost sheep of Israel specifically. Not to Gentiles not to Gentiles as well, but like not to the whole earth, because there are parts in the Bible where a woman comes to him to I think cure her or something like that, and he refuses. He says like, no, I've been just sent for the lost sheep of Israel. So there are things like this, but Muhammad is like claiming I came for everybody. So I came to kind of like spread this message that there's just one God. Because this message has been there since the beginning. You find this in Hinduism, you find this in all these religions, but it just kind of like corrupts. In a few thousands of years, people just take it, spin it off, and make it something. So Islam is kind of like, no, there's just one God. This is the Quran. It's never going to change, word by word. And basically, Quran is a direct speech kind of Allah to humanity. And so I was just saying the good and bad deeds. Muslims are afraid, but essentially, as a Muslim, if you live by the Islam and you are, let's say, there are sins and there's everything like that. Of course, everybody's doing that. But you have a mechanism of repentance in Islam. If you do something bad, you can kind of clean it up. And essentially, we hope that the mercy of Allah, even though if you did the best deeds in the world, it's never gonna be enough. Like just, let's say your eye, you can see with your eyes. Just that. Allah says that you would never be even 500 years of prayer is not enough to thank for that. Like if you get blind, how much money would you pay to see? So there are so many blessings that we don't even know about in our bodies that essentially, yeah, the good deeds are important, but essentially the mercy of Allah should clear all the Muslims or all the people of faith who were following some sort of guidance, and people who were kind of living on some island who never got in touch with anyone. Also, like, there's different rules how people will be judged, basically. So since one of the names of Allah is the kind of like, not the best judge, I don't know how the most fair or something like that. This means like it would be better to be judged by Allah than by your own mother, because he can take into consideration all your experience of life and give you a result based on your context where you live. Not like a Muslim in Canada is going to be judged differently than like if you live in Saudi Arabia.
You're judged by what you know.
So everything is judged by what you know. Everything is in your intention, and Allah can see what's in the heart. So yeah, so that's kind of what it is.
So you said you had a question, right? So this will be probably the most challenging thing I mentioned, and then I don't know. Maybe we should even get into your actual YouTube channel, because there's a lot of cool stuff there with the little time that we have or whatever. So what I was going to ask is, I've noticed something with a lot of religions, right? Which is that there's an indoctrination process where people get into it, they're taught. It's most effective when people are young. Like I would not call myself a Christian anymore, but I still pray to Jesus. So I don't know what the heck's going on. It's hard to get that out once it's in there. One thing I've noticed with a lot of religions is, and you kind of pointed it out earlier, with you'll notice Christians that are not living at all by Jesus' teachings. It's like, this is your Messiah. There's verses that say, if you are of me, or if you're of my flock, you'll do as the Father has commanded you, that sort of thing, and then they don't. It sounds like the Muslim belief system really tries to veer away from self-interest and selfishness, and you're striving to work for the will of Allah. It seems like, right? But to some degree, I don't know. That's what I gathered from some of the things that you said. I noticed in your interview with Akim that he had said there's not really room, or something to the effect that you can't fake this, or you can't bull crap, or you can't something like that. But one thing I've noticed is that you'll have a Christian that will come to you and almost try to recruit you, or you'll have a religious person that's going along seeming like they're recruiting people, or they really want you to know what they believe, or they want you to have an impression of how enriched their life is from this belief system. Like, all my needs are met, and since God has come into my life, everything has changed for the better, or whatever. But they're still driven. They still have vested interest in material things. Like they still seem to ostensibly, or on the surface of things, still care about the same thing a heathen would. Maybe they're not so likely to be addicted to drugs or live a life of debauchery, but it's still a concern. At least that's how it looks on the outside. Their social status, the luxuries in life, like the same stuff. Like, when you're done eating, if you're satisfied, you don't, unless you've got like a problem, you don't continue to fill your face with food. You sit back and relax. You're full, you're satisfied. And so I see with all these religions, I got the same issue with almost every religion that comes my way, is like, you're not satisfied, but they'll be like, no, I am. Life is satisfying, but yet they can still encounter struggles, still get upset. I'm sure everybody still has sorrow in their life in some sense or another. It's like, what makes this different? Why are you not just convinced of something somebody put into you, or you convince yourself of, and why is it definitely real in contrast to the other ones that are all claiming to be the real McCoy?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions there. I'm going to tackle them all.
Yeah, I'm ranty.
One thing, so there's this idea that only religious people, I'm not saying I'm like a missionary or something, but obviously if you feel that, let's say you believe something which is true, you want to share that. That's like an instinct. And just look at different groups in society which are not religious. For example, the LGBT community is very active in sharing what they believe. the community of whatever.
Yep.
Black Lives Matter is very active. Every community wants to share what they believe in. This is normal. So it's not really just about religion. It's more like, well, everyone's sharing opinions. I'm going to share mine as well. I mean, it's a little bit different because we're not focused on this world.
That's
we're talking about like, okay, what happens when you die? But it's kind of like, this is kind of normal. And in religion, especially in Christianity, but in Islam, there's also a concept called dawah, which means inviting to Islam. So this is, for example, that you should share the message of Islam with people if you have a chance, so that they can at least understand what this religion is about, because how else does Islam spread? For example, when they went to Indonesia, the early Muslims, now it's 230 million Muslims, the country, and it spread not by the sword, but by just merchants, and the king became a Muslim, and then the whole country became Muslim. There was no revolution, nothing, and just kind of like, this is how the religion spreads, usually. Sometimes it spreads by genocide as well. Like, you have different ways of spreading religion, but the most common is when you talk to people and you kind of like spread it through, that they see like, okay, this guy is praying. Why are you doing this movement? What is this? And they ask you about this, like, why do women cover? Tell me more about the modesty, or what is this? Why are you doing this? And everything in Islam comes back to Allah. Like, nothing makes sense. Even if I justify, why don't I eat pig? To be honest, I don't even care. It's because I have such a conviction that Allah exists, because I worked on it's called Aqidah, the belief system in one God, so much that all the other things in Islam, if I'm convinced that Muhammad is the last messenger, Quran is from God, and that Allah exists, and He's one, and He's been here since forever, and He's going to be here forever. When the universe evaporates, He's still going to be here, and there's all these things. So if you have this foundation, really, if there's a commandment in Islam, it's not a problem for me to say, okay, I was drinking alcohol a lot when I was younger, right? Or I was smoking weed. But it wasn't that difficult to cut it out, because I was like, okay, now I have this different value system, let's say. I'm not going based off what I want or what I need, because I would still smoke weed. But I would just be like, no, I'm going to follow this guidance and see where it takes me. And the more things I implement it, because Islam is very practical. It's not like you can just chill out after you become Muslim. There's many things you have to do throughout your day. Like, you have to wake up at 4 a.m. and pray. Like, you have to do this all your life.
And of course, you can't ask why to anything.
Sorry?
And of course, you can't ask why to anything, right?
No. In Islam, there's actually a tradition of debating and asking why if you're seeking knowledge. But if you're coming in there with ill intentions, for example, there's a lot of people who attack Islam or ex-Muslims or whatever, and they come in and they make up a lie like Muhammad was having sex with dogs and pigs, and they come in with this ill intention, and they start asking these questions, kind of like provoking Muslims, whatever. And like, for example, drawing the cartoon of the Prophet. I mean, it doesn't hurt me, but in Islam it's kind of forbidden to draw these things because people have a tendency to worship statues. So in Islam, it's completely forbidden to do anything. You can't even draw Allah, nothing like that. No one.
What if it's humorously?
Yeah, I mean, the same thing applies. Like, you can do it, like, because you live in the West or whatever. But in Islamic country that's run by Sharia, because as I explained, Islam is not religion. Islam is a political system, it's a judiciary system, it's a financial system. In a Muslim country, it's all about Allah. There's no kind of like...
I didn't mean you can't ask why as in, like, they won't let you ask why. I meant you can't ask why as in the same answer as earlier, like, why is the stoplight red? Why is anything? It's like, because there's been a few things that you've mentioned, like, you know, where it's like, you were talking about spreading the message because you want to share it or something like that, or that's what, I don't necessarily buy into the fact that everybody in the LGBTQ community, that's the reason why they're talking about it or promoting it, because they want to share it. I have nothing against that community. In fact, I'm glad it exists. But I'm saying not everybody has the same reason. Not every Jehovah's Witness is even going around spreading the message necessarily for the same reason. People have a variety of reasons why they might share something or put it out there. But I more meant, like, of course, you can't really ask why anything because it's the way it is. Like you said, like, why do you got to pray 5 times a day? Well, because that's what the book says, right? And so I'm of the mind, I think my brother is too, we like to ask a lot of questions and kind of break it down. Like,
I was the same. But you will never understand Islam this way because you will always find something. Well, why is the pig not? Why can I eat pig? And then I say, well, it's not. It's dirty. Let's say I say it's dirty and it's not healthy. The meat of pig. And then you say, but what if I come up with a scientific method in the future that the pig meat, I'll make a machine and it's gonna be healthy now. Will you eat it, Muslim? So now I have what you caught me. What do I say now? Well, I don't know. But it's not about science, machine, or your idea. It's about what God says. So to be honest,
why does God say that?
These rules, all these rules in Islam, come back to if you believe Quran or if you believe Allah and all this. Now I don't have time to go through this in this podcast because this takes years to develop and really kind of understand why is the Quran the last, let's say, word or whatever, and why is the Muhammad the last messenger. But I would say that's the belief of Muslims. That's why Muslims do what they do, not because they have some opinion whether I like the pig or not, or what do I think of this or not. No, it says like we hear and obey, that's true. But if you are learning about Islam, you're gonna ask a lot of questions. I've asked all the craziest questions you can imagine. I was asking everything. But again, it came down to, well, I have to somehow come to conclusion. Do I believe Muhammad or I don't?
Yeah.
Because if he tells the truth, then I don't care. Like if there was God and if the God revealed Quran to Muhammad, then what am I doing here? You know, like if this is the truth, then whatever it's coming with, I should accept it. Now if I don't want to accept it, that's fine. But then I'm saying Muhammad wasn't the messenger, which is okay. So you have this choice you have to make, right? And because if you take all the small things in Islam, you can ask forever. Why this? Why we? What I noticed, it always comes back to the Quran, and it comes back to Muhammad, it comes back to Allah. So I think working on those things, this is kind of a heavy theology then, to really understand, well, what is Allah? How is he ever living? And really studying Tawheed, this is Tawheed, the concept of Tawheed, the oneness, this is the key to Islam. Once you understand Tawheed, once you understand how the Quran was revealed and preserved and memorized and all that, and once you understand how the Prophet lived and what was the revelation like in his lifetime, then you kind of can put the pieces together, and that's when it kind of clicks, like after some time, when you have no background, like I'd never heard of Muhammad before, so I was like freshly into this, and I had, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a critical thinker. I don't like to be told what I have to do, but it's kind of, Islam means submission, complete submission. This is the translation. So it's not like a religion where Christianity maybe evolves with time, and let's say we can change this rule because it doesn't apply today, or we can do this and that. Well, yeah, but then you're going kind of against the word of the Bible, but that's fine if you want to do it, but that's impossible in Quran. Like you either accept it fully or you don't accept it. Those are the two choices. Now there are Muslims who obviously, let's say they combine many things, the 1,400 years of history, you have many sects, different things. I'm just telling you what the kind of like the core is. But I get these questions a lot, and it's kind of hard to explain because they will always pop up more questions, and it's going to be forever. I used to have the same question, so I'm telling you from my experience.
Sure.
It goes back to the Allah concept, and it's kind of difficult to explain it really because that concept I studied just for a year before even Islam. I just looked at like how can there be God, and just like why is there just one? Why is there not two or three? Why is he infinite? Why does he have a mind? How can he has a mind? What does he want? And what's the purpose of the life at the end of the day? And those things like what happens after you die and all that, that's knowledge that no one can know because like you have to die to know that, right? So like that thing can be only revealed. That's why you need these kind of like revelations or books. So that's when the submission comes in, where you have no kind of way to verify this. You just kind of have to trust that, okay, I've done enough to understand that there must be a creator. And I believe Islam is the only religion which matches this description perfectly because all the other ones are polytheistic or they kind of like man-made stuff. So that's when I said like, okay, I'm doing this because, and once I started implementing this stuff like not drinking, taking care of my wife more or stuff like that, like paying, in Islam you have to pay for everything. Like there's no way a woman can pay for something like a rent. And I started to do this stuff and you kind of realize like, oh, actually it feels good. Like I feel like I'm in the right role. And the more I do it, it's like, yeah, it's very practical.
It's a good fit for you.
Yeah. So it's like you realize it from studying, from practicing it. So once you start praying, you realize, oh, this is a game changer. Because you can only know things through experience, some things, right? So like, unless you try them out, I can explain it forever, but
Well, you
you
just
haven't
said
prayed, like, how can I say this?
you just said the magic word right there, which I kind of want to get into. There is experience. We've talked a lot about kind of like the tradition, some of the belief, the fundamentals about Islam and stuff like that. But where things kind of hit home for me, I got to give a shout out to a Muslim guy I talked to this week on TikTok. He's the Muslim rock star, so hey, shout out to you. He was really nice. And this might be a personal question, so answer it how you see fit and you're comfortable with.
I like the personal questions because sometimes I don't have all these theological questions. I might make a mistake, and then some Muslims will be like, "Why did you say that?"
Yeah,
I don't know, man.
But what I kind of want to get at is that, like, when we're talking about religion and God and spirituality, for me, I don't put a giant emphasis so much on beliefs and doctrines and dogma and stuff like that. I'm more fascinated with people's individual experiences with a higher power or God or spirits. Yeah, the metaphysical. So, in your experience with Islam, what could you say for you has been the biggest, maybe metaphysical experience, God opening epiphany that has hit Jan?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a difficult question. I had one experience, but you kind of, once you embrace Islam, you kind of have this experience where you look at the world like, how would I say this? As you're kind of clocking out, as you're dying almost. Like you look at everything like, okay, I'm not here gonna be forever, and like every your decision, like what am I gonna eat? It's affected by that. Like, why would I drink if I know it's gonna, like everything is kind of, my mind is already on the point of dying, So even if I'm gonna live 50 years, I live in this mode because I'm preparing to die. That's kind of Islam is preparing you to die successfully, basically. Let's take it like that. So the metaphysical, I had in Ramadan, which is this month of fasting,
Yeah.
We had 1 month. And it was last year, actually. So last 10 nights of Ramadan are kind of like special. And you don't eat for a month. You don't drink water for a month. Unless sun sets down. So it's very difficult. It's kind of a, how would I call it? Intermittent fasting is kind of similar, but no water is much more difficult, to be honest.
Yeah.
But billions of people do it, and there are exceptions. If you're unhealthy, you don't have to do it, right? So Islam is flexible in Sharia, in this law, where there are things you can do if you're, you can kind of accommodate your context. So it's not like rigid rules for everyone. But I had this kind of like, I was like wake up at 3 a.m. I think, just laying on my bed. And it's called the Night of Power in Islam, in Ramadan especially. Which
that
means
sounds
like
awesome.
Yeah, it's like one night. Yeah, it's one night worth 1,000 like years or something like that. Basically, what it means that Allah is like coming down, coming down and kind of like handpicking individuals that will, let's say, the hellfire will be forbidden on them or something like that. But what happened to me was that I had this crazy experience where I was laying on the bed and my body sort of like flexed out, and for 2 or 3 seconds I felt the worst fear of my life. Like it's unimaginable. I cannot explain it. Like
Dark night of the soul.
Whatever nightmare you had is like this, but worse. And I was awake. I wasn't sleeping. My wife was next to me, and she saw this, and I was like, "What is this?" And then at the same time, I felt like the most blissful state you can imagine, like the best whatever, not from this world stuff. Yeah, I was like, "What is? I don't want this to end." I was like, and this happened in like 3-4 seconds, and I was like amazed. And the only thing this is gonna sound corny. I don't want to sound.
No, go say it. Say it.
There was like there was like a voice in English. I've heard it in my head, obviously, but it says like "feel me," and I felt these two extreme opposite, things in my experience, and it was like really scary and amazing at the same time. And I'm never gonna feel this again because I think this is what's dying like. I think this is like what's gonna happen after death, one of these things. And I just wanna go to the other one, you know. So I think the best way to get there is Islam. Maybe there's another way, but I just think like, you know, doing all these things in Islam, it kind of gives you a good life because you don't get addicted to alcohol, drugs. You don't. It's kind of like you live a family life. You know, it's a simple life you live.
Well, it's amazing how this asceticism seems to invoke these states of because it's very common, right? Like one of the stories from, isn't this like what Muhammad did? He left everything. Didn't he spend a bunch of time alone in a cave or something?
He was meditating,
and that was when all the stuff happened to him. Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. All these guys seem to go off into the wilderness and, you know, have these God experiences.
But you guys win the coolest name for conversion thing.
Because power.
Buddhists, you got enlightened. Christians, you got saved.
Well,
so PC
baptism in the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. You guys got the night of power.
Well, no. This is not to convert. You know, I was already Muslim. The conversion is called Shahada in Islam. This is the name Shahada. That's when you say this phrase of "there is no God but God." You're a Muslim if you say this. And the night of power is in Ramadan. It's in this month, one night.
Right.
So all Muslims are kind of waiting for it when it happens.
Interesting.
Cool.
And there's a lot of what do they call it? The pilgrimage. I just want to talk a little bit about the pilgrimage because is that supposed to kind of like, was that written down kind of to mimic what Muhammad did so that all you guys could go and experience kind of like that thing too?
Well, it's the last pillar of Islam. You should do it before you die. Essentially, it's only for people who have money. So nowadays in Saudi Arabia, where's Mecca, where you have to do it, it's kind of difficult to get visa and stuff. So not many people in the COVID can do it. And you don't have to if you have some really bad conditions. But if you're able, you should go. It's a couple of days. I haven't been, and I'm not planning soon, but maybe. But it's like you're kind of really preparing for Day of Judgment. Everyone's kind of shaves their head. They put on a white thing. There's a Zamzam water that Abraham's wife. There was like a story. Abraham and his son built the Kaaba, the black thing in Mecca. We don't worship that thing. There's nothing. It's just a stone. But people just take it out like say, hey, Muslims worship this thing. No, we worship just Allah. You just pray that direction. That's kind of the point. There's nothing else about the stone that's kind of special. But you go, and there's a special things you do, like you go it takes a couple of days, and you go on the mountain, you go where the revelation, and stuff like that. It's a pilgrimage, right? And so it's supposed to kind of clean you out, similar to when you do Shahada, you kind of clean your sins out. So that's kind of like a cleansing process, and you kind of go back as a baby, fresh from the water.
Fresh as a daisy.
I would like to try it out. I don't know if I'll ever have the choice, but.
Wow. We should say something about his channel. You've got some great stuff on your YouTube channel. Did you ever imagine that you were going to have something like that going on in your life? Like to me, it looks like a pretty darn successful YouTube channel. And I think that you mentioned in one of your videos, like you weren't really expecting that Mike Tyson video to blow up, but it did. So I don't know what my question is. I guess kudos is what I'm really saying. Is good for you.
Yeah.
And thanks for being on here.
And everyone go check out the Muslim the Slovak Muslim?
Slovak Muslim, yeah.
The Slovak.
I mean, the channel, it's still a small channel, but I just try to kind of share, because my perspective is strange, because I was never raised in Islam, but I just kind of talk about it, because I see the benefit in the faith a lot. Like, I see how my colleagues at work, how sometimes they have troubles, or some things. I lived that life of like drugs. I lived the life of being addicted. I lived all of these things. I had girlfriends and all this stuff. And I know how destructive these things are. Like, they really, like, my family has been destroyed. Many relationships. My dad went to prison. All this stuff, like, could have been avoided if you stick to Islam or something like that. So I just see a tremendous benefit in religion because it's very practical, kind of like a GPS for life. Like what to do in life, you're lost, okay, GPS, what's your destination, go there. There's no like point in Islam where you kind of feel lost. And I used to have a lot of depression, or a lot of really hardcore depression where I would faint at work, they'd take me to the hospital, do like CT scans on my brain, and they would think like, and I felt like I'm dying, but there was nothing wrong with me. And this took a couple of years. So, yeah.
You don't want to go back to that?
Not really, because I think it was kind of like depression from the pointlessness of existence, you know, just like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm gonna die. It's all for nothing, but people just ignore it. Like, I can't even have a discussion. At least you guys are open to talking about stuff like this, but most atheist people or agnostic or people in my family, whenever I mention death or something, they're like, oh, why are we talking about this? Well, we're all gonna die, so let's just, why are we not talking about this? Like,
why is it so weird to talk about? It happened, it's the only thing that happens to absolutely every one of us.
Everyone believes in that. Everyone believes in that. Then what happens after? That's when we disagree, but everyone at least believes we're gonna die. So you should spend some time looking into it because we live in this like blue ball floating around the space. Okay, maybe Elon Musk will take us to Mars, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
Come on, Elon, figure out a way for us to live forever.
Yeah, we still have issues. So I just think the whole thing is like an internal job. I think it's the whole society is backwards. We're trying to pursue these external things, universe and stuff. And I was very scientific, but then I realized like it's all kind of reflecting back into your, and then kind of realizing it's already somewhere, and you kind of have to go deep in the reflective mode and see what happens. Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? I want to leave it at that. Thank you, Jan, so much for being a guest on our show. I could talk to you forever about this stuff because I have so many questions, but thanks for making the time to come out and do the show for us. Everyone out there, if you like the episode, I'm going to leave the link for Jan's YouTube channel in the description box, along with all of our other stuff. If you like the episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe, like, share with a friend, and everybody, until next time, stay spiritual.
Stay spiritual. All right.